Hello, 7th graders. Today I would like to review this assignment from last week, the Cornell notes about classifying organisms. And so if you have not gotten that done yet, this would be a really great chance for you to get a little bit of help on that. So please find that assignment. We're going to be going through the answers in this video. So we are looking at classifying organisms in this assignment. So to do that, we're going to go through some vocabulary and some history of these things and go through there as we move through the week when we're talking about classification. So we're going to be looking at the methods that are used to classify living things into groups, and we're going to talk a little bit about why every species has a scientific name. Here's a list of the vocabulary for this lesson. Got binomial nomenclature, species, genus, dichotomous key, and cladogram. So there's been lots of ways over the last hundreds of years to organize living things. Different scientists have had different theories on how this would be best done. So one of the first was Aristotle. He lived long ago, looking at about more than 2,000 years ago. He put all living things based that he knew of into two large groups, plants and animals. Animals, he placed an emphasis on if they had red blood, which is kind of interesting. And then plants were largely based on their size. Later in the 1700s, which was just about 300 years ago, there was a naturalist from Sweden named Carolus Linnaeus, which is the form of the name Carl. Linnaeus put things into two main groups also, but he called those groups kingdoms, and he is largely responsible for the naming system that we use today. In 1969, there was a scientist from the United States named Robert Whittaker. He proposed putting things into a 5-kingdom system, which is really similar to what we are using today, besides the fact that one of his kingdoms was divided into 2 kingdoms, the one that includes types of bacteria. So the current system of classifying is called systematics. Now, if you're following along on the worksheet, this is going to be in the second section under determining domains. Okay, we've got matching headings in the PowerPoint that go with the worksheet. So systematics uses all the known evidence to classify living things, including the cell type, their habitat, how their food and energy is obtained, or so how they get food, the structure and function of their features, their common ancestry, and molecular analysis. So they're looking at their DNA. How organisms are classified now is based on their characteristics or their traits, and they're put into 3 domains and then into one of 6 kingdoms. And you've got a copy of this chart on your worksheet. Okay, we've got the domains across the top here: bacteria, archaea, and eukarya. And then we've got the kingdoms in the next row. There are 6 kingdoms of living things. And you notice these first 2, bacteria and archaea, those kingdoms are the only ones that are found in their domain. And on the worksheet, you simply needed to write in the characteristics from this chart. So bacteria, they are simple and they're unicellular organisms. Archaea, they're also simple and unicellular, but they are known for living in extreme environments, and they've discovered differences in the DNA of these 2 kingdoms, and that's why they got separated. They used to be together in one. Next, we've got the kingdom Protista, and protists are unicellular, and they're more complex than bacteria because they have a nucleus in their cells. This kingdom does often get called the odds and ends kingdom because it's kind of like everything that they couldn't figure out where to put it, they threw it in this kingdom. Kind of like a junk drawer kingdom. Next, we've got fungi. Fungi are unicellular, but mostly multicellular. So there are some fungi that are just one cell, but most of them are multicellular, and they absorb their food from dead plants and animals. They do a lot of decomposing. Plants, or the kingdom Plantae, They are multicellular and they make their own food by doing photosynthesis. Next, we have Animalia. That's the one that we belong to and we're most familiar with. Animals. We are all multicellular and we have to take in our own food. So we are about 3/4 of the way through the first page of the Cornell Notes assignment, if you're following along with that. So the next definition is binomial nomenclature. That's a system for naming organisms or living things, and that was developed by Linnaeus. And it gives each living thing a 2-word scientific name. One of the words is species. That's a group of organisms that have similar traits and are able to produce fertile offspring. So like they can have babies, they can have more babies. An example of this not taking place is a mule. If you have a horse and a donkey, they can have a baby, and that's a mule. It's sort of got features from both. However, mules are all sterile. They cannot have baby mules because their parents were not from the same species. Same with a liger. Those of you that are familiar with ligers, they are also sterile because their parents would not be from the same species. The other part of the scientific name is the genus, and that is a group of similar species by just looking at its definition. So next we've got a chart that goes through the classification of a brown bear. So a brown bear belongs to the domain Eukarya, and that domain is anything that has a nucleus in its cells. And we'll learn more about those in the coming weeks. And there are many, many species in this domain, 4 to 10 million. Scientists are still discovering living things, so they don't know. And you've got some examples, everything from trees to the brown bear. They belong to the kingdom Animalia, and there's about 2 million species in the animal kingdom. Everything from lizards to the bear, dragonflies. The phylum they belong to is Chordata. That's going to be anything that has a spinal cord, like we do. Class is Mammalia, the class they belong to. There's about 5,000 types of animals in that class. They belong to the order Carnivora, and there's about 270 species in that order. Their family is Ursidae. Their genus is Ursus, and their species name would be Arctos. And so their scientific name is listed here in 2 words, Ursus arctos. The scientific name is the genus, is the first word, and the species is the second word. So it's a little confusing that our textbook puts this in the diagram. This picture is right out of the book. Now, you may remember from the beginning of the year, we were talking about classifying insects. I talked about Dr. King Philip can order fairly gross specials. That may sound familiar. That is a mnemonic device to help you remember the order of these taxonomic groups, okay? These levels of classification. Domain is the largest, okay? You can see here it includes the most species down to the species level where there is just one type of animal in that group. Binomial nomenclature, as I mentioned earlier, that was developed by Linnaeus, and it's still used today, those 2-word names. Scientific names are really important because each species has its own scientific name, and those names are used across the entire world. If you think about that brown bear, there are going to be many different names for a brown bear depending where you are in the world. If you are in Montana compared to Alaska, compared to Russia, compared to northern China, it's going to be the same species of brown bears. However, they're going to have different names and in different languages, but the scientific name is always going to be the same. There are some tools that scientists use to classify living things. One's called the dichotomous key, and that's a series of descriptions that are put in pairs that will lead you to the identification of an unknown organism. So this example is out of the book. It's a small dichotomous key for identifying some fish called gobies. And the way these work is you always start from the beginning. So if we are looking at this fish, 1A, it says this fish has a mouth that extends past its eye And then it would be called an aerogoby, where this fish does not have a mouth that extends past its eye. Then we would go to step 2. So now this fish, the mouth does go past its eye, so its name would simply be the aerogoby. If we were going to do the next fish, you would still start at the beginning. So if we look at this one, number 2, A, does its mouth go past its eye? No, it does not. So we would go to step 2. Step 2 says this fish has a dark body with stripes. Then it would be called a chameleon goby. If the fish has a light colored body with no stripes, we would go on to step 3. Now this fish is dark colored, and it does have some really light stripes here, so it would be called a chameleon goby. So you follow this dichotomous key until you end up with a name. If you get new steps, you simply follow those steps. We'll be using these more through the week, and you'll find that they're a very useful tool. Another tool is called a cladogram, and that's a branch diagram that shows the relationships among organisms, including their ancestors. So if we're looking at this picture, on the top we've got a bunch of different animals, and then going up diagonally we have a list of characteristics. As you travel further up, you have more characteristics that are added, and the animals that branch off on this one, they branch off in between these characteristics. So if you look at this, I can tell you that a chimpanzee, a hamster, a lizard, and a salamander all have lungs because they have all branched off after lungs appeared as a feature. The next one up is claws and nails. So salamanders do not have claws and nails. Salmon do not have claws and nails, but everything that branches off after that, the lizard, the hamster, and the chimpanzee, they all have claws and nails. Continuing up, if we're talking about fur and mammary glands, so those would be mammals, the lizard, the salamander, and the salmon do not have those features, but the hamster and the chimpanzee do because they've branched off after that characteristic is placed on the cladogram. And then the last one, the opposable thumb, only the chimpanzee has that characteristic in this cladogram. The others do not because they branched off after or before that trait was put into place. So that's the basics of the vocabulary for this lesson and also some examples. If you look at this worksheet, you should have been able to get all these answers out of here until we get to the lesson 2 review part, which is sort of the bottom 2/3 of the second page. The first 2 questions, look at those underlined vocabulary words, okay? These were just definitions put into a sentence form. Number 4, describe how you would write a scientific name. I'm going to give that one to you. If you had the patience to watch all of this, you write it with the genus and the species, giving you the 2 words, and you always capitalize the genus, which is written first. The species is never capitalized. So genus and species are the 2 words. Genus is capitalized. Number 6, which is not used to classify organisms. This is a multiple choice question. Go back up and look at systematics to find this answer. Okay. Then the last question, number 7, it says fill in the organizer to show how living things are organized. So look at that chart about the bear. Okay. Domain is the largest group. The domains are split into kingdoms. Kingdoms are split into phylum. Phyla are split into classes. Then we have orders, family, genus, and species. So you're simply traveling down that chart with the bear and fill in the names of the taxonomic groups or the classification groups. Okay, I hope this helps. I know it was not extremely exciting, but your summary, that should answer the question at the top of the page, your essential question. How are living things classified? And you can provide some examples. You might want to mention systematics in there as part of your answer. So there's a review of that lesson outline. No, it wasn't a lesson outline. It was Cornell notes. But if you hadn't done that yet, hopefully this helps. And next, I would like you to watch an Edpuzzle video. So please take a look at that. It's another pretty short one, 7 minutes. Have a good day.